Chrysalis wasn't always the deceptive, evil, icky villain she is today. Don't believe me? Then how do you explain this? Queen Chrysalis. She is one of the most popular characters in My Little Pony, infamous for her, well, only appearance in a Canterlot wedding. She is the queen of the changelings, a race of ponies that, as far as can be told, trade a cutie mark to all have horns, wings, the ability to disguise as other ponies, and closely resemble burnt Swiss cheese. After a failed attempt at taking over Equestria, she basically disappeared from the show. At least, so far she has. It is assumed that everything to her is basically seen here. She's the queen of the changelings and by nature feeds off love and is therefore hostile towards all race of ponies. Recently though, I have found that this may not be the case. Let's look at her initial appearance some. After being found out, she dramatically transforms into her natural appearance and shocks everyone. Then follows up by having a throwdown with Celestia and winning. Other than the fact that she was able to overpower Celestia with only the power gained from the emotions of shining armor, I noticed a few oddities here. For one thing, where did Celestia go for the whole first minute and a half after realizing who Chrysalis was? I mean, 1 minute she's here, and then poof! Off to a coffee break while Chrysalis gives a speech about how she has the upper hand for a while. Was she hesitant? And if so, why? When fighting Nightmare Moon, her sister Celestia was first very hesitant to do anything. She first tried to convince her otherwise, and even when she knew her sister wouldn't be convinced, she ran away rather than confronting her. Only once she knew there was no other option did she decide to use the elements of harmony. In comparison, here with Chrysalis, she seems to hesitate for a very long time. Then she drums up the confidence to do something and she seems to have the upper hand. But then after we hear Chrysalis yells of fear, suddenly Celestia is on the losing hand of the battle? What happened? Did she suddenly start holding back due to a burst of sympathy or regret when she heard the fear in Chrysalis's voice? Then, when she realizes there's nothing else to do, she calls for the main six to retrieve the elements of harmony. I mean, this sounds an awful lot like what happened with the confrontation with Nightmare Moon, but how could that be? Celestia doesn't have a close, long-standing relationship with Chrysalis like she did with Luna, right? The other major oddity I notice here is that Luna, the other major Alicorn princess, is nowhere to be found for the wedding of another Alicorn princess. One would think that this is a big enough occasion for her to be present for. And then suddenly she just pops up at the end like, "What I missed, guys?" Last we see her, she was using up all of her energy, it seems, watching out in case this quote-unquote threat decided to show itself, trying to figure out who it was and if it was a legitimate threat. So where did she go? To find out, let's look at Luna a bit. She's able to read others very well and can tell what kind of problems might be troubling them. The last thing we saw her do was to see Twilight run off to her friends in a panic. At this point, Twilight has been the one not only to stop Discord, but also to free Luna herself of Nightmare Moon. It would be silly for Luna to take Twilight's little episode here lightly, especially when the kingdom is under threat. I would guess that she investigated after this, looking at where Twilight ran off to, where from, and why. Maybe by eavesdropping a little bit like Twilight did, she saw Chrysalis's true nature. However, Luna has another very notable ability, dreamwalking. Through meeting people in their dreams, she has been able to find out what has been bothering them, and since dreams are a result of memories, she may have also been able to do some research to find the root of the problem like this. Luna most likely realized what was happening, that Chrysalis found a way to sneak into Canterlot unnoticed, and left. But why? Luna is a somewhat emotionally unstable character. She let her envy get the better of her, she has a short fuse, and she can be very self-conscious. What do most self-conscious people do when confronted with people they have bad history with? They hide, and that's exactly what Luna did here. And this isn't the only instance that someone great and powerful like Luna disappeared when faced with an old companion that they could sympathize with. Even in the very first episode, at Nightmare Moon's return, Celestia inexplicably vanishes. Many people sort of assume that this was sort of Nightmare Moon's doing, but that isn't ever proven in any way. In fact, Luna seems startled at Celestia's return, as though she had no idea where she had been. It seems like Celestia, once again, couldn't bring herself to combat her sister, and instead relied on the main six to hopefully make a connection with the elements. Luna, again, is nowhere to be found when Discord is freed from the stone prison. You can look at this instance in two ways though. In one of my other videos I theorized that Discord was once someone that Luna knew very well and was friends with even. In that sense, it is the same situation where the great Alicorn princesses choose to avoid their problems rather than face them. Or alternatively, Luna and Discord had something in common, 1,000+ year-long imprisonment. At this point, maybe Luna still felt guilt for what she had done being Nightmare Moon, that she was no better than someone like Discord, and couldn't bring herself to come out and combat him, especially when she can sympathize with his imprisonment. Every major villain in this show has been a reoccurring problem. Nightmare Moon revealed herself, was imprisoned, and then returned a second time to take over. Discord made a second return before he was dealt with permanently as well. So did King Sombra, and even the Season 4 villain Tyrek. All except for Chrysalis. But maybe Chrysalis is a villain that Equestria has had to deal with once before. Nightmare Moon and Chrysalis are the only two villains not introduced by Celestia. Perhaps this is because they both involve memories that are painful for her to recall. So just who did Chrysalis used to be, and how did she ever get to this state? Normally, I won't look at the comics as a necessarily canon source of information, but from what I've heard, their writers do check in with the show's writers to make sure there isn't any sort of conflict. So it is worth looking at least. In the latest comic, there is a mirror, much like the one that leads to the human world. This one, on the other hand, led to an alternate dimension in which everyone's morality seems inverted. The good are evil, and the evil good. In this world, Twilight is still just a unicorn, and Sombra hasn't fallen into corruption. This was a former state for both of them. It seems to suggest that this is what they could have become had they and others made different choices. Chrysalis too is present in this world. Through this, we can see what the writers might agree Chrysalis would have looked like had she never turned evil. And my word, it's like a whole different character! She has no holes, no crooked, twisted horn, no ugly, pointed insect wings, even her hair looks well kept. Is this what Chrysalis used to look like? Before Cadence came along, was she the Princess of Love? This has a lot of implications. In our old universe, Cadence is the Princess of Love, the Crystal Princess. And with that title came the duty of ruling the Crystal Empire. This guy seems to imply that there once was some kind of Crystal Princess that is no longer around. But wait, the Crystal Empire? But she's not a crystal pony, she's a changeling. Didn't that duty once belong to Sombra before he became corrupt? Sombra certainly isn't any kind of changeling. If anything, he's closely related to crystal ponies. Or so I thought. Take a close look at the two. The dark gray color, the curved horn we see nowhere else but in these two characters, the green eyes, and when Sombra gets closer and closer to the crystal heart, an object filled with and fueled by the love of the crystal ponies, his only visible reaction is to lick his lips in anticipation, as if he wanted to feed on it. If Sombra was the corrupt king of the crystal ponies, and Chrysalis the queen of the changelings, then the two may be related. After all, this is the only time we ever hear king and queen. So what am I suggesting? 1,000 some years ago, the Crystal Empire was ruled by King Sombra and Queen Chrysalis in alliance, and the empire was once home to both crystal ponies and the changelings. I mean, the crystal ponies produce love and light that can be used to fuel the crystal heart. The changelings are energized by love. It would only make sense that they would live in some sort of symbiotic relationship, where what extra love the crystal ponies had was used both to fuel the crystal heart and to give some of the changeling folk an extra kick in their step to help with the daily goings on. But if Chrysalis was the lost crystal princess, then what happened? In order to find out, let's look at the equestrian timeline in regards to the Crystal Empire. At some point over 1,000 years ago, Sombra became corrupt, probably due to the use of the Alicorn amulet. Of course, the first to realize Sombra's corrupt nature would be someone who works closely with him in governing the Crystal Empire, Chrysalis. We see evidence in a Canterlot wedding that Chrysalis has some sort of connection to the changelings that they can communicate some very basic information through, such as their location. Many insects like ants communicate with their antennas, giving off chemical signals and making small sounds, sort of in the same way. It makes sense that Chrysalis might be able to communicate with the changelings like this. When she realized Sombra's malevolent intentions, she, like Celestia with Luna, was hesitant to do anything to stop someone so close to her, and that includes alerting the crystal ponies to use the crystal heart against him. Instead, she would do something more along the lines of evacuating the Empire to save them. Using her special method of communication, the changelings with their wings would have all been able to escape pretty easily. The crystal ponies, however, being mostly earth ponies, wouldn't escape so easily. Realizing what was happening, Sombra made his move and put the Empire into lockdown. This explains why there's no changelings in the Empire, and why they didn't just use the heart at the first sign of danger. Now, Chrysalis is left without a home for either herself or hundreds of her escaped citizens. What does she do? The only thing any sane leader in that situation would: seek help. Luna and Celestia probably got word of the Empire's state through someone like Chrysalis asking for help. Unfortunately, as the story goes, while Sombra was defeated, he caused the entire Empire and its inhabitants to vanish with it. What would go through Chrysalis's mind at this point? She asks for help from her neighboring allies, and instead, they return with the word that their king, her entire empire, and all the remaining citizens vanished. This would be heartbreaking. Imagine losing your best friend, maybe even a spouse, half your nation, and your home all at once. This all just happened to Chrysalis, and who gets the blame? Celestia and Luna. What happens next is largely up to headcanon. I don't doubt that she sought some form of revenge, but how exactly? Who knows? Something else is left unanswered though. How did she go from this to this? The Season 4 finale showed that due to Cerberus leaving his post, Tyrek escaped from Tartarus. But Tyrek wasn't the only one in prison there, and probably wasn't the only escapee. Cerberus left his post sometime in Season 2. Interestingly, Chrysalis, the only villain in the show who we never hear any backstory on, appears just 5 episodes later. Seems silly to think that someone of this kind of power with such an army would just sit idly by for 2 whole seasons when there's so much that could be done. Something must have been holding her back, and that something was Tartarus. Whatever Chrysalis did in trying to avenge the loss of her kingdom, a few things are certain. She went with her changelings on a feeding spree, and once they fed on the love of another without holding back, they would only end up wanting more. This wouldn't have happened in the Crystal Empire before, because they would have used moderation, being considerate of others around them. With that consideration replaced by anger, they would feed on as much love as they wanted. This feeding spree would have certainly called the attention of the 2 sisters, and forced them to use the elements of harmony again. This is what sent Chrysalis to Tartarus. The changelings may have also been sent there, but even if they hadn't, they would have been at a loss without their queen and would scatter into hiding. So, what is the cause of their bad physical state? While we don't know much about the functionality of a changeling's body, it's pretty safe to say that when a changeling's daily intake of love suddenly skyrockets and then plummets to less than what it was before, there are going to be some pretty drastic side effects. So, Chrysalis lost half her citizens, and the other half went homeless. That's even more sad than Discord not ever having a friend before, or Applejack's parents being implied to be dead. My Little Pony. Friendship is sad.